When I was building my third army, the one that I actually stuck with, it came down to two options: Adeptus Custodes or Necrons. And I chose Necrons, not because Custodes weren't cool. Honestly, they might be one of the most visually impressive armies in the entire game. I chose Necrons because Custodes scared me as a newer player. They're one of the most elite armies in 40k, which means when you make a mistake, you feel every single one of them. You live and die by those 4-up saves, and I just wasn't confident enough in my game knowledge to pilot something that unforgiving. Today, Games Workshop dropped a Faction Focus covering 3 brand new Custodian detachments in the new edition, and I'm going to be honest, reading through these made me look at that decision all over again. So let's break down all 3, what they do, and whether any of them would change my mind about running the 10,000. Quick reminder before we jump in. These new detachments each cost 1 detachment point, so in a 2,000 point game, you get 3 points total. So you can run all 3 of these together or combine them with a standard 2-point Codex detachment. That flexibility is actually really significant for an elite army like Custodes, and we'll come back to that at the end. So alright, detachment number 1. Might of the Moritoi is built around the Custodi Dreadnoughts, specifically those Custodians who were grievously wounded in battle, interred in an ancient armored chassis, and sent right back into the front line, which is honestly very on brand for the 10,000. The core rule is called March of the Honored Dead, and it does 2 things. First, all Adeptus Custodi Walker units get a +2 inches to movement. Secondly, they get +1 to advance and charge rolls. So your Dreadnoughts are faster, they advance more reliably, and they're getting into melee more consistently, and that's the whole point of the Combat Dreadnought, delivered in one clean rule. There's also the Auromite Sarcophagus upgrade, which reduces the CP cost of the Crushing Impact stratagem by 1 when you target your Walker with it. Crushing Impact is basically the new Tank Shock. You slam your Dreadnought into the enemy unit, roll dice equal to your model's toughness, dealing mortal wounds on 5s and 6s. There's also a risk of blowback on 1s, but with how tough Dreadnoughts are, that's a very manageable gamble. And then there's a prioritized Eradication, a 1 CP stratagem that gives the Telemon heavy Dreadnoughts, Arachnus Storm Cannons rapid fire 6. At close range, that's potentially 36 shots from a single model. 36 shots from one Dreadnought. Okay, so this is where I have to be really honest with myself. When I was considering Custodes, part of what drew me to them was exactly this. The idea of these hulking ancient warriors in armored sarcophagi just steamrolling across the board. This detachment delivers that fantasy completely. The extra movement and charge bonus means your Dreadnoughts aren't just slow, tanky threats, they're actually getting where they need to be. And the Telemon with rapid fire 6 at close range is scary. That's the kind of unit that changes how your opponent moves their entire army. The armory tag on this detachment means you can't combine it with other armory detachments, so there are limits on how you stack it, but as a standalone or paired with Silent Hunters or the Hammer Blow, this looks very strong. Speaking of that, detachment 2 is the Silent Hunters, and this one centers around the Sisters of Silence, the Anathema Psychana, the psychic blanks who make psychers skin crawl just by being nearby. The core rule is called Skin Crawling Disorientation, and it does 2 things. First, when a Sisters of Silence unit advances, that advance doesn't stop them from being eligible to perform actions. And for anyone who's played objective-based missions, this is huge. Your Sisters can move fast and do mission actions in the same phase, which means they're genuinely pulling their weight on the board rather than just standing around being an anti-psyker. The second part is an ability called Ceaseless Vigilance. Once per shooting phase, your Sisters unit can select a visible enemy unit within 12 inches and null it, increasing its detection range by 3 inches. This connects directly to the hidden rules of 11th edition, where units in cover can hide from shooters. Your Sisters are essentially acting as spotters, pulling concealed enemies out of hiding so your Telemons and Custodians can actually shoot them. There's also the Psych Out Grenades upgrade, which gives your Sisters the explosive keyword and lets them reroll mortal wounds against Psyker units specifically. And the Synchronized Inferno stratagem, a 1 CP, gives Witch Seekers Torrent Flamers the Blast 1 keyword. so his flames spread even wider against large targets. Silent Hunters is the most tactical of the 3 detachments, and honestly the one that took me the longest to appreciate. On first read, it might seem like they're the least flashy option, but when you think about what it actually enables, it's doing something really important. The units that can hide from line of sight in cover are going to be a genuine problem for elite armies, and they need every shot to count. Custodes can't afford to waste firepower at units that they can't see clearly. The ceaseless vigilance turns your sisters into the answer to that problem. Combine that with the ability to advance and still perform actions, your sisters aren't just a tax unit keeping psychers honest, they're actively contributing to the mission scoring and your target acquisition every single turn. For 1 detachment point, that's excellent value. Detachment 3 is a Tyrannotoi Hammer Blow. And this one is all about the Terminators, dropping in from the sky and smashing the most dangerous thing on the board into the ground. The core rule, called the Hammer Falls, and Terminator units that make an ingress move, basically a deep strike, that turn can reroll charge rolls. Now in 11th edition, you can drop within 8 inches away of enemy units, which means you only need to roll a 9 on 2 dice to make that charge. That's roughly 1 in 3 chance of failure without any help. With a reroll, you're turning that into something you can actually rely on. The charge that was previously a coin flip becomes near certainty. Then there's the Memno locked Shrine Cipher enhancement, which is where it gets really spicy. Normally, you can only deep strike from turn 2 onwards, giving your opponent the entire turn to screen their important units. The enhancement lets the shield captain in Terminator armor make an ingress move on turn 1 and bring the whole unit of Terminators with them. Turn 1, right in your opponent's face where they had a chance to set up their screens properly. And if your charge still fails and you need to weather a storm of fire, Hardened Resolve is a 1 CP stratagem that gives your Terminators +1 toughness when they're being targeted. Alar's Terminators are already brutally tough. Adding a +1 toughness at the critical moment makes them impossible to shift before they get their charge off in the following turn. This is a detachment that may have changed my mind about Custodes when I was army shopping, and here's why. One of my concerns about Custodes was they're so elite that every mistake costs you. If your Terminators fail a charge, they're standing in the open getting shot and you've lost your tempo on the whole game. The Hammer Blow detachment addresses that exact problem in 2 ways. The charge reroll means the failure rate drops dramatically, and Hardened Resolve means that even if things do go wrong, your Terminators can take the punishment and still deliver on their next activation. The turn 1 deep strike is the kind of threat that changes how your opponent has to think from the very first deployment. You can't just set up your screens casually knowing the Terminators are coming on turn 2. Now you have to account for turn 1 as well. That psychological pressure on your opponent is genuinely valuable. For a player who felt Custodes were too punishing, this detachment directly solves that problem I had with them. So, 3 new Custodes detachments, Dreadnoughts thundering across the board, Sisters of Silence pulling enemies out of hiding, and Alaris Terminators dropping on turn 1 and rerolling their charges. Here's what I keep coming back to. When I chose Necrons over Custodes, my reasoning was the Custodes were too punishing for a newer player. Too much riding on individual rolls, too little margin for error. These 3 detachments are directly addressing that. Charges are more reliable, Dreadnoughts get into combat faster. Even when things go wrong, your units can dig in and survive. Does that change my mind about switching? Probably not. I'm invested in Necrons. I'm genuinely excited about where they're going in 11th. But if you're a newer player who's been eyeing up Custodes and holding back for the same reasons I did, I think 11th edition might be the right time to take the leap. Running all 3 of these detachments together gives you a complete toolkit. Dreadnoughts for close combat dominance, Sisters for objective play and target spotting, Terminators for surgical strike. That's a proper army with defined roles for every unit, which is exactly what newer players need to actually learn how to play well. Link to the Warhammer community article in the description, and let me know in the comments, are you a Custodes player? Which of these 3 detachments are you most excited to run? Drop it below. I read everything. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.